Hi guys, welcome back. Today we're talking about something slightly different. If you've been here a while, you know that I am absolutely obsessed with all things autumn, Halloween, spooky, dark side of the year. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I romanticize my life this time of year in hopes that if you're a person who struggles with something like seasonal affective disorder, this time of year is a little harder for you. This can give you some inspiration for how to just brighten and romanticize your everyday life. I know that sometimes people make it seem like it's superficial to want to beautify your surroundings, to want to have like an aesthetic or a core of some kind. But honestly, I think that beautifying life is great for mental health. I don't think that that's superficial, and I think there's something very beautiful about being able to romanticize whatever season of life you're in. Also, just as a reminder, while we get into my recommendations for how to romanticize your life in the autumn, I do also have to recommend my spooky novel that's out. Like I've mentioned, it's not going to have the not for resale. This is just my author spoof. But check it out. I made a video on what it contains and I read out an excerpt, so I will put that up here somewhere if you want to hear more about my book. So we're going to talk about decor today. We're going to talk about food and drink, fashion and accessories, activities, and a little bit about media, so TV, music, books, and let's just get straight into it. Starting with decor. One very simple way of elevating your daily journaling practice or writing, notes taking, whatever it is that you use pen and paper for, is to get a feather quill and ink. Now, I will say, if you're like me and you have longer nails, it can get a little bit messy, so it's not my favorite thing in the world. But if I'm feeling particularly like dark academia, or I'm wanting to just add in a little extra oomph, a little extra vintage to my day, I will use a feather pen. Something else that can be kind of a staple around the house, and I have this year round. If you've ever heard of Turn Me Royal, they're a website that turns a photo of either yourself and your significant other or your pets into old-timey paintings. And they're actually quite professionally done. My husband once bought me one for my cat that I had in my parents' house. Then I got him one for his dog, and now we have two for our cats. And we also have one of the two of us. And I think it's just so silly. I think it's so hilarious because obviously it's like partly a joke, but also it does add this ambiance of like vintage, and you see like your family and your pets on the wall and you think, oh, these are creatures that have been alive for thousands of years. Lately, I've also been loving getting these house items that are dressed up as vintage items. So for instance, I have some pen cases that look like book stacks, typewriters, bat pencil cases. I also bought these tissue box covers that look like vintage books. So it's just a nice way to have an object that you were going to have inside anyway look a little bit more old-timey. Fall foliage is a must for me. This is one that I've been using for years and years, and every time I pop it in the living room, it's just immediately very autumnal, immediately adds this pop of very warm, muted color that I love. I also love to decorate with gourds, dried corn, cinnamon brooms. The ones from Trader Joe's are so fragrant. They smell so strong for a couple of weeks. Scented candles, candle holders, and candelabras. There are also some candles you can buy that are like bleeding candles. So they look black from the outside, but when they start to burn, it's almost like blood trickling down. I also decorate with dried wheat, pampas grass. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Pampas? I think that's how you say it. Especially around the end of September, when that is really the time to be harvesting those types of wheats. I think it's so cool to just create a bouquet of all these things and have the very beige and brown color palette. And also decorate with acorns, with pine cones, fake mushrooms, fake grapes, woodland creatures like cats, owls, ravens, witches. I love journaling in leather-bound notebooks, something that has like tea-stained leaves and braiding on the spine. It's just instantly so romantic. Now, if you combine that with a feather quill, forget about it. It's the best feeling in the world. Obviously, I love to make a fire in the hearth. If you have a fireplace, that is an instant way to just make everything feel so cozy and warm, especially if it's contrasting with a not so warm outside. If it's like a gloomy day, I love to just have some tea and read by the fire, light a candle. This is not necessarily autumn related. This is more winter for me, but I'm going to mention it here because I'm probably not going to make a video on romanticizing winter. Although actually, I think I do have a video on that already. Putting eucalyptus on the shower head. When they're fresh and the steam from the shower head is coming up, it infuses you with the scent of eucalyptus, which is really good for clearing out your nose and your throat. You can even have eucalyptus tea if you're sick for that purpose. So it's just an extra little spa treatment feeling. And one other thing that I love in terms of decor is coordinating the tablecloths and the table runners according to the season and according to the mood and according to the decor. So for instance, when it's more of like a fall harvest vibe, I like to get tablecloths that are beige or brown. When we're nearing Halloween, I prefer to go more like black lace, maybe some Halloween stitching on it. Table runners with pumpkins on them, especially around Thanksgiving time, a lot of like harvest imagery. So that's about it for decor. Now moving on to food and drink. I love a good cozy mug. The bigger the better, the more rustic it looks the better. I have some that look like cauldrons, some that look like baths, some that just look like great craftsmanship. I also like to drink kombucha out of a fancy glass. Again, this is one of those things that's not necessarily specific to fall, but I still like to do it because it feels like such a healthy way of, instead of reaching for a cocktail, reaching for something that's really good for your body. But if you do want a different kind of tasty drink, I love making homemade cider. So I'm pretty sure this is not the way you're supposed to do it, but the way I do it is I juice apples, then I boil them for a bunch, and then I use a sieve to get the foam out, and then add in there cinnamon, nutmeg, other pumpkin pie spices, some orange slices, and then at the end, so that it doesn't evaporate, you can add rum, whiskey, your drink of choice. You can also make mulled wine. I don't make my own. I wouldn't really know where to start. I guess you just add spices, but I've been loving in past years the Witch's Brew from Trader Joe's. It is quite sweet. I haven't seen it this year in stores. I hope that it's coming. A lot of my seasonal food in the fall is either from Trader Joe's or from World Market. So Trader Joe's, I love their cornbread. I like to make this recipe where I dice a bunch of onions, I shred an entire zucchini, I combine that with their cornbread mix and whatever else you need for that, and also cheddar and sriracha. And then I add another layer of cheddar on top of it, and then when it's ready to come out, I add truffle on top. Really, really delicious. And the zucchini adds like some extra volume, some extra moisture, and, healthy vegetables. I also love stocking up on World Market's autumn-themed coffee this time of year. I feel like every year they come out with new flavors, and at this point, I stock up for the whole year. Most of the year I'm having World Market, except around summertime when I run out. Trader Joe's also has pumpkin pancakes. I like making pumpkin pie from scratch, although I'm not a very good baker. I don't have the patience for it. I force myself to make some pumpkin pie, apple pie, just because it's fun and it's seasonal. I do have a harvest pan from World Market where you flip it upside down when it's done cooking, and it's supposed to look like fruits of the harvest. I have not really been able to get it to not stick to the bottom, so usually it just completely falls apart. But if you are good at baking, please do let me know how to make sure it doesn't stick, because I would love that. S'mores in a fire is always a must-have in the fall as well. Having local apple wine or apple cider. Making a harvest bowl with a bunch of the vegetables that are harvested this time of year. I usually like to put in either rice or lentils, chickpeas, peas, mushrooms, pine nuts, zucchini or squash, whatever you want. I also have been liking mashing up my matcha with a mortar and pestle recently. I used to just put almost boiling water over my matcha and collagen powder that I drink every day, but lately I've noticed that when you use a mortar and pestle, it blends really well. I don't need to keep stirring it with a spoon, and you don't need to even put that much water in it for it to blend really well with a mortar and pestle. And then you just add that into, if you want to make it like a latte, you put some ice and some milk of your choice, pop the matcha water over it, and looks nice and ombre too. And hot chocolate, again, that's one of those things that could be more winter, but always good in the fall as well. Moving on to fashion and accessories. I got myself a Victorian style perfume bottle and put my perfume into it, and now I just kind of like spray it, very old-timey, makes me feel very fancy, and it's reusable. Always good to have a pair of witchy boots. I have two, one that's more casual, every day walking around the city, and then one that is more heeled, more for special occasions, Halloween parties. High knee boots are also great if you want that feeling of like fall, about to go horseback riding, go get a hayride. Black nail polish is really fun this time of year. Just instant boost of spooky, especially on my claws, which tend to be quite long usually. I love Vampire Diaries core this time of year, especially when school's starting up. I don't know if anyone does this. It feels kind of silly, but I love to just throw on the Vampire Diaries, watch just like the first few episodes, because after that it gets kind of meh. I did buy a pair of jeans that's very Elena Gilbert style. You compare that with like black leather jackets, warm smoky eyes, layered cami tops, chocolate colored straightened hair. All of that just screams the Vampire Diaries. Also love a good oversized cardigan or sweater. There was one that was my mom's, and she has it from before I was even born, and that used to be like my go-to sweater for so long, and now it's finally starting to like wear apart a little, and so because of that, I decided I need to buy a couple regular, normal time sweaters, so that's what I'm wearing now. Also, I love a good just casual wool witch hat. Sometimes this can be a little bit more conspicuous out and about. People think you're wearing like a costume, but I don't see why it has to. I mean, it's just a hat with like a slight point to it, and I instantly feel so magical when I'm wearing one. And around the house, my go-to is usually just very Halloween-themed graphic tees. Most of them are from Doll Skill, as well as other places, and just pairing that with like comfy pajama pants, usually like bamboo pajama pants, and Halloween-themed socks. And also I love to wear some slightly witchy, spooky looking rings, triple goddess moons, garnets. I love garnets, moonstones, Celtic knots, things like that. So that is for accessories and clothing. Moving on to activities I recommend. Obviously, going to a pumpkin patch is really fun. Getting on hay rides, going apple picking. I especially love going apple picking, then using those apples to make cider and apple pie. Feels very wholesome to me. Very farm to table. Going to a corn maze, going to a haunted house. If you're in the Midwest, that is one of the perks, is there's a ton of corn around. So when I was living in Chicago, there was this really awesome haunted corn maze that my friends and I went to one year, and I would strongly recommend it. Gonna see if I can find the name of it. Watching scary movies in theaters can be really fun. I really liked, I think it's called The Last Voyage of the Demeter. It's the most recent rendition of Dracula, about the ship they take from Romania to London, where Dracula gets transported there. I thought it was good. Some people in the movie theater didn't agree, but I'm an OG Dracula fan, so I thought it was nice. I didn't like the new Dracula that came out this year. I know it's supposed to be like gore, horror, comedy, but I didn't enjoy it at all. I don't really like gore, and I don't know. I prefer more like muted, ominous horror over comedy horror, but that's just me. One really fun day trip, if you have the means, is to just rent out a cabin for a night, hike during the day, make a bonfire at night, make some s'mores, have some mulled wine, tell scary stories with your friends, throw a Halloween party or attend a Halloween party, get really spooky into the costume. This year, I think I'm gonna be a vampire Marie Antoinette. Last year, I went as my shadow self, and what else? Just like generic undead girl. I think it's really cute to walk around the neighborhood on Halloween and just look at people trick-or-treating. If you don't live in a particularly trick-or-treating neighborhood, just going to one, walking around sunset. It's very wholesome as well. Celebrating the autumn Sabbats, the harvest of Mabon and Samhain as well, which is more of a feast honoring the dead, honoring the coming winter, saying goodbye to fall. I feel like pretty much anywhere you live, there's bound to be some cute sleepy town town nearby. So just taking a day trip there, having lunch or dinner, walking around the shops, going on a ghost tour, going to a farmer's market, adopting a black cat. We already have one. Not that she's an accessory, but she is very Halloween-y. And then in terms of media, I don't know if I'm going to be able to give like an extensive list because I didn't think about all my recommendations. I feel like I have so many. A few of the things that came to mind in terms of TV: The Vampire Diaries, like I mentioned, Dracula 1992, yes, such a good movie. Practical Magic, The Craft, Byzantium is kind of a slept-on one. American Horror Story, Scream Queens, Twilight, especially if you're watching it ironically, because I think it's just so bad, it's funny. In terms of music, I do have like a party, more like EDM, rock, Michael Jackson, Halloween playlist. But then in addition to that, I love this Halloween lo-fi music, especially while I'm just doing Pilates, lighting a spiced pumpkin candle, listening to that music. It just feels like a very slow, almost feminine morning. I love that routine. Then in terms of books, like I mentioned, The Curse in Their Veins, check it out, link in description box. One book that I read this year that is witchy that I absolutely loved is The Witch and the Tsar by Alessia Salnikova-Gilmore. It's a recreation of Baba Yaga, where she's not like in her crone era, she's more like middle-aged, even though she's hundreds of years old. And it also incorporates some historical fiction as well. This time of year is always great for some reading on Jungian psychology. I would recommend Jung the Mystic, Jung on Synchronicity and the Paranormal. Then there are a few Jungian books that I haven't gotten to yet. Forged in Darkness has been on my bookshelf for a while. It's also a good time for pagan books if you're into that sort of stuff. So there's The Wheel of the Year. I also love anything by Danielle Dulsky. I think she is an absolute spellcaster with the way that she writes. Anything by Alice Hoffman, if you know Alice Hoffman, very classic witch fiction writer. Anything by Elizabeth Kostova, she is one of my favorite authors, if not my favorite. The Historian was so good, so rich in description, so ornate, and it does include Dracula, so I would recommend that one. She also has a different one, I forget what it's called, it takes place in Bulgaria. That one hints at mysticism, but it never actually pans out. It's actually not a paranormal story, but it still does have some spooky elements if you just want the ambiance. I'm not going to go through all of my like horror or spooky books that I have on my bookshelves, but I would recommend The Murmuring Bones if you're into siren mythology. Mexican Gothic, that also has some Jungian elements as well. Opium and Absinthe, especially because I am obsessed with its cover. It's one of the most beautiful covers I've seen in forever. The Mermaid of Black Conch, Cicadas Sing of Summer Graves. It was okay. It's like a Southern Gothic. I didn't really get into it as much as I would have liked, but it is like a little scenic. The Lost Village is really good. The House Between Tides, not super paranormal, but it does have kind of a Gothic setting. I'm gonna be kicking myself after this because I'm probably forgetting so many good books that are spooky. What are your recommendations? I'd really love to know. Let me know. If you have read The Curse in Their Veins, please, please, please leave me a review. It really does help me so very much, and I would appreciate it. And I will see you soon.